Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the online webinar by Usercentrics. My name is Margo. I'm a regional representative for Usercentrics for the German-speaking region in Europe. But obviously, we cover more regions than that. We want to talk about users and why they should be the central decisive factor for choosing any consent management strategies, solutions, and anything further that has to do with your entire consent management and data ecosystem. So without further ado, let me share my screen and share with you a few insights that we've gathered alongside our work with companies that are or weren't user-oriented. I hope everyone can see the screen and that the recording is well in progress. Now, as I said, for us, the most important thing is are the users, essentially, right? The whole reason that there are that our businesses function, and the whole reason that there are regulations for how our businesses are supposed to function are the users that are at the core of our goals. And we at Usercentrics obviously believe that the end user should always be the decisive factor for any decisions made, strategic or when picking out consent solutions. What is the current state of consent management for all stakeholders? Now, if I ask you that, I'm sure that a few different answers are going to pop up. We've been through a lot of changes since 2018. Well, actually, they started a little bit before that as well. But a lot has happened in terms of data and consent management, right? And I personally like to use a few anecdotal examples to state what the current situation is with consent management. One of them being this. In July 2022, the European Commission was sued for violating the EU's data protection rules. Now, that's a bit ironic, isn't it, given that the European Commission is the one who actually writes down the rules and the frameworks for consent management and data protection. It was sued by a German citizen who did discover that there was no, adequate consent solution applied on one of their websites. And the trial is still in discussion. Now, what that tells me is the current state of consent management is simply messy. This is also proven by this following example. We see that one single organization, nonprofit organization, NOYB, based in Austria, sent 226 complaints within one single month in 2022 for unconform or deceptive cookie banners. Given that the law has been implemented for more than 3 years now, and lots of businesses have had the opportunity to implement an adequate consent management strategy and solution, we see that the fact is not all of us have taken consent management into consideration. And users are complaining. Maybe it's not even 90% of the users, but the ones who do complain, they do actually make an example of the businesses that they complain about and how messy the current state of consent management still is. Now, to put it into a little bit of a more structured discussion, my colleagues from the research team at Usercentrics have created this graph showing that we did go through a kind of a preparation and education stage when GDPR came into place. There was a huge fear of fines. There was a lack of clarity as to where the gray zone ends and what are the exact requirements and what are the loopholes that could be exploited, right? Then there was a disillusion stage. Lots of businesses went through denial, and then kind of like desperation, giving up because the topics seemed to be too complex. It seemed to bring too many changes about, especially when it came to the ecosystem of solutions that they were using. And there was a no data shock, right? So everybody was afraid that they would lose significant data when they started implementing stricter consent rules. For the end users, it was also not that much of a pleasant thing, right? Like ideally, a lot of users did say that they would love to just be able to trust the businesses to handle their data securely. But that was not the case, right? There was a lack of understanding, and there is still a lack of trust on the user side. On the other hand, they also don't want to have to click through thousands and thousands of paragraphs on a cookie solution or in a privacy policy. So we did go through a depression stage as well. And now we're kind of in a reconstruction stage where both the businesses and the users understand how important consent is more and more every day. And there is more discourse, but also more flexibility when it comes to thinking out of the box and implementing a sustainable consent and data security strategy. The uncertainty that we have experienced in the recent years, however, can be categorized in more or less these 4 different focal points, right? We have the regulation complexity, which was highlighted also by the example of the EU Commission being sued. There's a lack of consistency outlined by the regulators. And then again, there's also a lack of understanding as to, there's this discrepancy between the regulators and lots of the data protection workers and how the system works. So, the infrastructure complexity and the regulation complexity often go hand in hand. There's also market complexity, right? There's a very rapid development in marketing, data analysis, consent solutions, and so on. And so businesses and users find themselves a little perplexed as to what to choose next and what is the better or the current most reliable product. And then there's the user complexity. I mean, people act in unpredictable ways sometimes, and we can gather data to kind of extrapolate and make assumptions as to how they're going to behave. But especially when they act out of distrust and a lack of transparency, this results in stopping or limiting relationships. And this again leads to the users not trusting businesses and the businesses not knowing why the users are not trusting them exactly and how they can correct for that. So the key takeaways that I want to leave you with so far are that there's still general confusion about regulations, both on the user and on the business side. Organizations struggle to implement the regulations that are often inconsistent and not very clear. And there is a clear lack of user trust. Which brings us to the question, what has your strategy been? Have you been proactive about consent, or have you been reactive when it comes to privacy? A lot of businesses have remained reactive because of the higher complexity that is involved in the topic. And that means that, they waited until a regulator came and made them act, told them, hey, you're currently non-compliant, you need to change your infrastructure, you need to do this and you need to do that. A fair amount of the businesses that we speak to are acting reactively and only come to us once there's a real issue or a real problem. Personally, and at Usercentrics, we believe that a proactive strategy is obviously better. It should focus on trust. It should focus on the user. And it should simply question the current data strategy to be able to build a more sustainable solution for the future. There's the saying in German that we've translated, which is like, you can hire lawyers against fines, but you cannot buy broken trust, right? So the more proactive the businesses become, the more likely it is that they retain users in times of uncertainty. A lot of businesses had asked themselves, well, yeah, but, I kind of like need the data. Yeah, but you wouldn't have the data if you didn't have the users on your side, right? So privacy is inherently a user-centric challenge. You do have the data challenge, you do need the data for your business, and you do need the consent of the user. But all of this would not exist if the users did not trust your business. So how can you secure a user's trust? And how can you use that to avoid fines? First of all, being proactive, again, is the right way to go, in our opinion. You should create clarity and transparency in an informational type of stage in the interaction with your users. You should create control. You should set up systems that help you identify what happens to the data once it flows into your business. And let's be honest, a lot of businesses and a lot of technologies are not optimized to do so. Increasing data flow and monetization is obviously important, but this can only happen, and it would actually be supported by better control of the data that you've gathered based on your users' trust. And the customers are going to actually notice that. They will notice if you have all of your infrastructure together, if you have like very clear pathways of dealing with data and protecting it. And this will, again, lead to a circle of it all pouring back into your business and monetization. A lot of people do try to simplify everything externally and think that implementing a simple solution like a cookie banner on the website is the entire way to go. And we're more than happy to oblige with that, given that that is the product that we provide. But we do believe that the new state of consent management is going to be centralized, and it should actually combine all of the data channels beyond the website and beyond the first few points of interaction with the users, all the way into the backend system, and how your company's workers actually treat the data and communicate with each other about it, right? So the key takeaways so far are that the need to be proactive about consent grows, and it is actually the recommended way to treat the whole privacy topic. And that the consent strategy must be centered around the users, because that is the only way that you will gain insight into what you can provide to your end users to gain their trust, keep their trust, and actually make the best use of the data that they're willing to give you. So how do you set up a sustainable privacy strategy? Well, there's obviously a few ways that you can go, but we think that the 3 focal points of that would be, think of your legal team to avoid fines, definitely speak to them, have a very clear discussion about what the requirements are for your particular business and where you might be exposed to risks. Definitely consider the trust factor. Why do your users visit your website? Who are your users at all? How do they trust you? Or why do they keep coming back? What do they need to continue their relationship with you? And all of that is going to amount to a good marketing strategy. You can increase your ad performance if you're completely aware of what the users have consented to. And obtaining valid consent is going to help you actually track everything that you need to know and everything that the users are willing to be share with you in a meaningful and secure way. We've actually seen that a lot of people actually complain about, well, yeah, but if I put a banner on my website that allows the blocking of cookies and so on and so forth, I'm going to lose a lot of data. We've actually seen that because of the trust factor, many times users are more likely to consent to a GDPR compliant solution where they do see an option to deny all, rather than a non-GDPR compliant solution where they don't really feel like they have many options to consent. We've also seen that there's a few factors that, of course, are relevant for how you set up your consent strategy, like, for example, the wording, the design, and the transparency, right? So here, again, you need to focus on the users instead of what your marketing lead or what your business wants to have on its website, right? In the end, the users want to be understood. They want to feel like they have control. They want to feel like they're safe and everything that they're sharing with you is safe. And they want to know that if they are giving some data, it will be used to their benefit. Building trust and loyalty is not easy, but since we process like over 61 million consents per day, we've gained some insights as to what are the variables influencing consent rates. And obviously, it has to do with design, it has to do with market, it has to do with the technologies as well. But overall, it also has to do with recognizing who the people are interacting with your business and what their needs are. And more times than not, you will see that having the feeling of control and having the feeling of having been informed to the best of their knowledge is absolutely the leading factor for users to consent to the data processing that you're asking them for. Contextual consent is a great example of how you can actually let your users know that you're really on top of your privacy game, right? Contextual consent refers to blocking certain content based on the user's previous consent interactions with your website. So for example, if a user actually blocks a service such as Google Maps or YouTube, they wouldn't be able to access certain contents on your website, and they would be informed about that as well. That really creates a feeling of safety and reliability that boosts the user trust and definitely make sure that they will be coming back to your website. We've also seen that you can experiment with different looks and feels of the banners. And there are some differences in percentage points that you can see based on the design of your banner. But overall, this is not going to be the absolute and utmost decisive factor for how you are going to get your users to consent. You can think about that, and you can use all of these strategies about where to place the banner and how to color the buttons and what information to include inside. But again, the most important thing remains, do you know your users and how they want to actually interact with that banner? So the key takeaways so far would be that if you change your mindset, privacy can be a competitive advantage depending on how you actually treat it, right? The more you invest in it and the more you show that you're on top of your game, the more users are actually going to trust you and be willing to consent to sharing their data. And if you understand your users, what they respond to, and what factors influence their trust, you'll be able to set up your strategy to be future-proof. What are some of the best practices that we've seen? We work with bigger and smaller businesses all across Europe. We've worked with businesses in the US as well. And we see that there are a lot of differences depending on the region and obviously depending on the different groups of users that the businesses are trying to address, right? We do see that across all platforms, one of the most important things is having all of these aspects of the privacy strategy be covered. So consent should always be prior to any data exchange. It should be absolutely explicit and easy to opt out of. It should be given freely, so nudging your users or forcing them to accept something is more frowned upon than not. It should be granular. They should have the feeling that they really do have different options to choose from according to their needs. It should be very well informed, so you needn't spare any information when actually especially for the users that are very interested in it. And it should, of course, be documented. So having a very well set up system and data flow which documents how consent is being transferred and used across your company's infrastructure is one of the best ways to, first of all, be safe, but second of all, like really be able to at any moment prove to your users that you're really taking care of their data. One of the clients that we work with, it's Zalando. They're a huge online fashion retailer, especially famous in Germany, but not only. We work with them on a web and app-based solution, and what you're seeing here is the app-based consent banner that they're using. We like to show this because they've really made sure that the consent banner actually matches the look and feel of the website. It gives the users the flexibility to choose what they're going to be consenting in a very granular way. But they've also set up an ecosystem that makes sure that all of those consent data and consent IDs are being transferred very well across their entire data ecosystem. Another company that we work with is ImmoScout24. This is an online platform for rental apartments or apartments to sell or properties. They used to have a bit of a poor reputation because they had no consent, lots of ads on the website, lots of content that was gathering data in the form of cookies and other formats. And they did a whole revolution in the past year where they changed their entire marketing strategy. And of course, they also changed the way that they operate with privacy. So now their website shows a very granular option to choose for which purpose you would consent to which cookies, right? So you would be able as an end user to consent to personal ads, personal content based on your profile, or you would be able to consent if you actually want your interaction with the ads would want to be tracked by ImmoScout, right? So going this very, very granular and proactive way, they were able to secure a lot of customers and a lot of customer trust and basically rebrand themselves as a very reliable website. Because we can't do everything alone, we also invest in working with partners who are also reliable and trustworthy. Some of them you see on this slide, and we wanted to give a big shout out to one of our very important partners, which is Big ID. What they do is they enable preference management and they help manage data rights requests. This is basically the second step after implementing a cookie banner, and they really help companies make sure that they're tracking the data in the backend as well, and they can actually process a data deletion or data request by the user in a very quick and easy and seamless way. This is very important because for us, because we want to invoke a sense of trust and a sense of transparency in the users, we also need to collaborate with partners who believe in the same and deliver the same type of service. As a final word, I think it can't be said enough to say that taking the users into consideration first and foremost, and matching their needs is absolutely the decisive success factor for how your business is going to grow and develop in the age of privacy and consent. With that being said, I hope that this was at least slightly informative for you. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Usercentrics at any point. I'm also personally available, and I would love to philosophize, discuss, or take a look at your personal use case to see how much did you actually take your users into consideration when setting up your entire data strategy. Thank you. Take care.